Yeah, Gio and GM Gavin Wilkinson have been able to already spend more time scouting out future Timbers than they did a season ago. Recall the club had maybe 6 weeks between the MLS Cup and the start of their training camp and that run up to 2019. Now PTFC is out to make the most for their early playoff exit. Step 1 in the Timbers offseason, inking Ciba Blanco to a multi-year extension as a designated player.
The part that we love probably the most is just the competitive nature. You know, he's a player that takes the field every single game with one focus, and the determination, I think, rubs off. And I think he's at a very good age where I believe and I think that we'll get the most out of him. And statistically this year, if we just take what the subjective is and the visual out of the equation, which is that he's a fantastic player, he's being recognized more in the league as one of the standouts, and he's risen into the top 10 statistically within the league in just about every facet relative to an attacking midfielder. And you know, for us, that's important. It justifies what we're doing, but also we can start to build around him a little bit more, and I still think get more out of him.
In years past, there's been some minor tinkering to the roster. I think we'll still see that. When do you see, like, do you ever look at it like a massive overhaul, or is it always just piece by piece?
If it's a massive overhaul, something's gone drastically wrong. And I think when you get clubs talk about going through a rebuilding phase, it's because they're not prepared for that. And I think part of the evolution of the roster last year and this year was the introduction of a couple of younger players, and I think those players have shown themselves, and they have succeeded. The Paredes of this world, Marvin Loria, Renzo. We've got some younger players that have been very productive. We brought in Brian Fernandez, a younger forward that is, as you've seen, when things are going well, probably one of the most talented players in the league. And so I think we've addressed that. I think next year we're going to start to add players, you know, 2-3 players between 25 and 28. That they're not experiments. We're not bringing in younger players, but that they are proven, and that they probably have 200-300 games behind them, but they still have their best years ahead of them.
All right, business at hand as well. Diego Valeri is obviously beloved by so many people here. Yeah. This is the business. This is what's tough about it. Where do you stand with Diego?
You know, there's so many different parts. There's the heart, there's the brain, and you know, there's what's right for Diego, what's right for the club, and it's got to be a collective agreement where he wants what we want and we want what he wants, and so everyone's happy. And I think the first thing is that there's been enough recognition, or maybe not enough, but there will always be a lot of recognition and a lot of appreciation for what Diego has given to this club. And I also think that it's been a relationship. I think for many years he was the focal point of the Timbers, and we've got other very important players, Blanco, Chara, Steve Clark this year that you've seen, Mabiala. There's so many other players, Viafania, that have contributed to the success of the organization. And I think with Valeri, he's a special player, he's a special person, and you know, he's got to decide what's right for him. And we have to also look at it from the same aspect, and there's been probably too much publicly in some ways relative to what's happening and how we're going about it, but I'll state what's been out there, that we've made him an offer. We consider it to be a very healthy offer, but it has to be what both want. And you know, what I would say on the other side is, how many players retire at a club where they're completely happy? And that's where there's got to be an investment from the emotional side as well, and we're hoping that it pans out.
You mentioned Steve Clark. To me, he was the team MVP. I mean, he comes in as the backup, and my goodness, how many times did he save you guys when Jeff went down? Yeah. He's a guy looking for money too. Yeah,
is he? I don't know.
I would think so.
It's athletes are athletes, right? Yeah. So it's, but it's also, at what stage do we not only say Steve was absolutely tremendous, but was he given the platform to do that? You know, he was at DC, and we were able to be creative and bring him into the organization where it didn't have a massive cap hit, knowing that he was coming out of contract, knowing that he's not available for free agency. You know, he's somebody that is such an interesting character, and I mean that in the most positive of ways. He's somebody that I just feel very comfortable talking to. And he's very inquisitive and insightful at the same time. So if I look at Steve both short-term and long-term, you know, the hope is that he's around for many, many years. And I think what he can offer this club as a personality and as a cerebral individual is beyond just what we saw on the field last year as well. You know, he's a player that I would hope wants to become a part of this community long-term.
So you go to the store, you got a shopping list. You got what? You got a right winger, you got a central mid, you guys got 4. I mean, where do you want to go first?
You know, Gio and I have just got back from Europe. We spent 48 hours. It was a quick trip where there was no, I would say an interrogation of a future player. And meeting with the club, but it was more, we didn't have this time last year. We had to conquer and divide, where Gio and I collectively couldn't take 48, 72 hours to get on a flight, go to Europe, meet with players, meet with a player, I should say, meet with the club, and have a collective decision. So I think, if anything, the negative is that we're able to get out in front of this a little bit more. So that's one position, hopefully, that we've solved. We've solved the right back. And, you know, I said earlier that Moreira's returning. We've extended the loan for 6 months, which to me gives me 6 months to solve the problem, to keep him here for several years. So he's a player that's been extremely important to us, and I can see becoming a fan favourite as well, just the way that he plays, the energy that he plays with. But as we look at the winger, and then a midfielder, and then a forward, we've still got 3 positions. So, you know, and that's presuming that I was talking to a central defender.
Right.
I was talking to a central defender in Europe. So we will see.